Hello dear uncles and aunts who are following the channel The Sentiments of Old Age. In marriage, not every woman is fortunate enough to have a kind-hearted husband's family, especially a mother-in-law who truly loves her daughter-in-law. Sometimes, what seems like affection is, in fact, only a form of exploitation. Today's story is a heartfelt confession of a young woman. She once believed she was lucky to have a gentle, loving mother-in-law. Yet one night, after overhearing a conversation in the bedroom, she was left utterly devastated. The bitter truth forced her to pack her belongings and leave her husband's house in the middle of the night to return to her own mother. What could turn a kind-looking woman into someone so heartless? Why would a once devoted husband suddenly turn his back in just a moment? And what gave this young woman the strength, after so many acts of forgiveness, to finally choose a new path for herself? Let us listen to the story of a daughter-in-law who was pampered by her mother-in-law, only to break down in tears after overhearing a midnight conversation. My name is Ngân, I'm 32 years old. If anyone ever said being a daughter-in-law is full of hardship and sorrow, I once thought I was the exception. In the early days at my husband's house, I lived in love and care, like something out of a fairy tale. But later, I realized it was nothing more than a sweet disguise hiding a truth that shattered my heart. I was born into a well-off family. My parents ran a construction materials business, and with things going smoothly, I never lacked for anything as a child. From my studies, clothing, to trips with friends, I had it all. Yet my parents always taught me to live simply and think of others. I grew up in that loving care, believing life was only full of peace and ease. Then I met Tuan at a gathering of our two families, who had known each other for many years. He was the son of Uncle Lam, my father's close friend from his army days. Tuan was tall, calm, and soft-spoken. What impressed me most was the way he treated elders with respect, always courteous and considerate. Our relationship started with simple greetings, then gradually became closer. After nearly a year of dating, he proposed, and I accepted without hesitation. I said yes not only because I loved him, but also because I believed his family was a place worth entrusting myself to. The first time she met me, his mother, Mrs. Mai, smiled warmly, took my hand, and said, "This girl is truly kind-hearted." I loved her from the very first glance. "Come and be my daughter-in-law. I promise to treat you like my own daughter." Hearing those words, my heart overflowed with joy. What bride-to-be wouldn't be happy knowing her mother-in-law cherished her so deeply? Our wedding was held in a luxurious restaurant. Friends and relatives came in large numbers to celebrate. Everyone praised me for being lucky to marry such a good man, into such a respectable family, with a graceful, understanding mother-in-law. One of my close friends even teased, "You must have earned blessings over many lifetimes to get such a sweet mother-in-law." I just smiled in contentment. After the wedding, I moved in with my husband's family. Their four-story house stood proudly in a quiet street. My in-laws lived on the second floor, while my husband and I stayed on the third. Every morning, my mother-in-law would prepare breakfast and gently wake me up. "Eat first, then rest a little. Being a daughter-in-law isn't military service, you shouldn't suffer." Many times, I tried to help with cleaning or washing dishes, but she would wave me off. "You've just moved in and are still adjusting, let me handle it. If you break something, it would be such a pity." My husband loved me dearly as well. After work, he often joined his mother in the kitchen, then urged me to go upstairs and relax. I once thought of myself as a princess stepping into a fairyland, cherished and pampered by my husband's family. With my mother-in-law, I never held back anything. I entrusted her with all the savings I had accumulated before marriage. On her birthday, I even bought her a gold necklace and often took her to the spa for beauty treatments. Every time I called her Mom, and she treated me like her own daughter, my heart was filled with happiness. Back then, I truly believed I had reached the ultimate happiness of a woman's life. Every morning, my mother-in-law would wake up early to prepare breakfast, then knock gently on my door and call me with a tender voice. "Ngân, come downstairs for breakfast, dear. Today I made your favorite fried eggs." Each time I came down, the dining table was already neatly set, with a glass of milk waiting for me. She would kindly ask if I had slept well, or if I felt any back pain. My husband would drive me to work in the morning, and in the evening, the whole family dined together. After that, he and I would go up to our room, watch movies, and chat. Life was so peaceful and sweet that many times I thought, so marriage really is simple, just meet the right person in the right family, and that's enough. Until one day, when I was getting ready for work, my mother-in-law called me into her room. Her face looked slightly tense, though her voice was still gentle. "Non, I'd like to ask you a favor." Without hesitation, I nodded. "Yes, Mom, please go ahead." She hesitated, then softly said, "Your Aunt Han and I are planning to open a wellness center for the elderly. Your aunt has the location and connections, but we're short on capital. Could you lend me 200 million Vietnamese dongs? I don't want to ask your father." At first I was surprised, but I quickly smiled. "Of course, Mom. I have a savings account. I'll withdraw the money this afternoon and give it to you. Please just make a note for me to keep track later, okay?" Her eyes lit up. She held my hands tightly and thanked me with emotion. At that moment, I felt so warm inside, even proud to be her daughter-in-law. That very afternoon, I withdrew the money and handed it to her. No papers, no written agreements, because to me, whatever Mom said, I believed. But little did I know, that was the beginning of days filled with confusion and hurt. Just 2 weeks later, she came to me again, this time in the evening while my husband was away on a business trip. "Non, the shop is still being renovated, and I'm short on funds. Could you lend me another 50 million? I hesitated. Even with a decent income, 50 million was no small amount, and I had just given her 200 million not long ago. But thinking she might feel embarrassed to ask her son, and knowing that businesses often needed extra funds, I agreed. From then on, her requests for money became more frequent, each with a different reason: rent payments, equipment purchases, urgent debts. At first it was tens of millions, then hundreds. Altogether, I had given her nearly 400 million. One day, I gently asked, "Mom, when will the shop open? I'd love to come celebrate with you." She seemed startled, waving her hands quickly. "Not yet, dear. The opening day doesn't suit my zodiac sign. Your Aunt Han said we should wait until next month for better luck." Her answer unsettled me. My instincts told me something wasn't right. One day, while she was out, I gathered the courage to call Aunt Han to check. After just a few sentences, I froze in shock. "What shop? I don't run any business. How could there be any joint venture with your mother-in-law?" I felt my world collapse. My heart pounded wildly, my body turned cold. Everything had been a lie. When my mother-in-law returned, I couldn't hold back and asked her directly, "Mom, I just spoke with Aunt Han. She said she never did any business with you. Please explain this to me." She froze, stammering, Well, I was planning to, but then I changed my mind. Please don't be upset with me." I stood in silence, waiting for her to continue. And then something I could never have imagined happened. My mother-in-law suddenly dropped to her knees. The woman I once thought to be gentle and virtuous, my mother-in-law, Mrs. Doan Trang, suddenly fell to her knees, clutched my legs tightly, and sobbed. "I was wrong. I don't have any shop at all. The truth is, I got addicted to gambling and lost everything. I thought I could win it back, but the more I played, the deeper I sank. I was afraid your father-in-law would find out, afraid the family would fall apart, so I could only rely on you." Hearing that, I was stunned. The mother-in-law I had proudly told all my friends about turned out to have deceived me day after day, month after month, with such calculated lies. That entire night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the breakfasts she had cooked, the vitamins she had handed me, the warm embraces when I came home late. All of it, it seemed, had only been a facade. The harsh, cold truth had dragged me out of the sweet dream I had so blindly believed in. The next morning, I quietly packed a few clothes, planning to return to my parents' house for a few days to regain my composure. But as soon as I opened my door, my mother-in-law was standing there waiting. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she had cried all night. She grabbed my hand and pleaded, "Non, please don't leave. I know I was wrong, but I promise I'll give up gambling. I'll change." I looked at her, and my heart softened. In the end, I nodded, "I'll stay. But I hope you keep your word. I don't want this to affect the family." She burst into tears, hugged me tightly, and nodded over and over like a child. At that moment, I still believed that compassion could awaken someone. But I was wrong. In less than 2 weeks, she came to me again, this time asking for 30 million Vietnamese dongs, claiming it was to pay back friends. I hesitated, but eventually gave it to her. A week later, she begged for another 50 million, sometimes saying she had lost money in a savings pool, other times complaining about stolen goods. The reasons kept changing, but every time she cried and trembled, making it impossible for me to refuse. My husband knew nothing. He thought his mother and I were living in harmony, working together to build the family. I hid it from him, not because I didn't trust him, but because I couldn't bear for him to feel the pain of knowing the truth about his own mother, nor the shame of my own naivete. One day, I mustered the courage to ask, "Mom, do you have records of the money I've given you, so I can keep track?" She simply smiled and answered softly, "What are you talking about? I'm borrowing as your mother, not a stranger. I remember everything, I'll pay you back one day." Her words weighed heavily on my heart. I knew it was an irresponsible response, but I still clung to the fragile hope that she would change. During that time, I lived under constant tension. The total amount I had given her had reached nearly $500 million VND. I kept it all a secret from my husband, drowning in fear and disappointment. I lost my appetite, no longer enjoyed our outings, and my mood grew heavier each day. My husband began to notice. "What's wrong with you? You've been so different lately. Are you hiding something from me?" I forced a smile. "I'm just a little tired, probably from work." I didn't have the courage to tell him the truth, afraid to see the disappointment in his eyes when he learned that his own mother had deceived me so many times. One day, I decided to investigate further. I went to my mother-in-law's former workplace, where she had once sold cosmetics. Her old colleague, Ms. Hong, looked uneasy when I asked and finally confided, "Honestly, I didn't want to meddle, but maybe you should know. Your mother-in-law stopped selling a long time ago. Lately, I've heard she's been tangled up in gambling, and she's borrowed money from many people." Hearing that, my heart felt as though it was being crushed. The sense of betrayal was more painful than anything I had ever experienced. That evening, I resolved to confront my mother-in-law directly. But this time, I no longer had the patience to be gentle. I could no longer stay silent. Looking straight at my mother-in-law, I spoke with a calm but determined voice. "Mom, please tell me the truth. Up until now, you've borrowed nearly $500 million from me. I need to know exactly what that money was really used for." She froze. After a few seconds of silence, tears began to fall. I gambled. I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop. Every time I lost, I wanted to win it back, and the more I tried, the more I lost. It's like a spell, my dear. I'm sorry." Hearing those words, I felt as though I had fallen into an abyss. Trying to steady my trembling voice, I asked again, "If that's the case, why didn't you tell my husband directly? Why did you leave me to shoulder this alone? Have you ever thought about the consequences?" She lowered her head and stayed silent. I sighed and said slowly, "From today on, I can't give you any more money. If you truly need help, then everyone in the family must know. I can't carry this burden alone any longer." She sat in silence, her eyes red with tears. I left the room with a heavy heart. I knew the time had come to share the truth with my husband. That evening, after dinner, I suggested the whole family sit down together. The atmosphere in the living room was suffocatingly tense. I looked at each of them, then gathered all my courage to speak. "I'm sorry to bring this up now, but I can't hide it any longer. Mom has borrowed nearly $500 million from me, with all sorts of reasons. Opening a shop, needing capital, losing stock. But the truth is, all of that money went into gambling." The room froze in shock. My father-in-law's face went pale. Slowly, he turned to his wife and asked in a hoarse voice, "Is this true?" My mother-in-law broke down in sobs. "I was wrong. I thought I could win it back, but I just lost more. I was too afraid to let you know, so I only asked Non." Tuan held my hand tightly, his eyes filled with disbelief. "Mom, didn't you promise to quit last year?" She choked through her tears. "I know. I really was wrong, but I couldn't control myself." I turned to my husband, my voice breaking. "It's not the money that hurts me, but the lies. I truly believed Mom loved me, that she saw me as her own daughter. But in the end, I was only the one she kept borrowing from, over and over again." The heavy silence suffocated us all. My father-in-law stayed quiet for a long moment, then stood up and walked into his room, ignoring his wife's tearful calls. Tuan could only sit still, his hand gripping mine tightly. The next morning, the whole house was eerily quiet. My father-in-law left early without a word. My mother-in-law locked herself in her room, refusing to come out. By late afternoon, when I returned from work and set my bag down, I saw her already sitting in the living room. In her hands was a stack of documents. Her face looked gaunt and sorrowful. When I walked in, my mother-in-law tearfully held out a stack of papers. "This is a written pledge I made. Please give me a chance to change. I promise to go to the temple regularly, to cut ties with my gambling friends. I'll also confess everything to your father-in-law, but please don't leave this family. I took the paper, my eyes blurring. Truthfully, I had never intended to leave this family, but I didn't yet have the courage to offer forgiveness. Softly, I replied, I won't leave, but I need time. From now on, whenever it comes to money, you must be transparent with the whole family. You can't just come to me alone anymore. She burst into tears, while I quietly turned and walked upstairs. Never before had I felt such a distance between my mother-in-law and me, even though we were only separated by a few steps on the staircase. In the days that followed, I tried to return to my daily routine, but my heart was always heavy. Memories of her kneeling to beg for money, of Tuan's disappointed eyes, of my father-in-law's silence during the family meeting haunted me each night, robbing me of sleep. I chose silence, saying nothing more to my husband, unwilling to reopen old wounds. I told myself that time would heal, but instead, it only left me more exhausted and distant. Lately, Tuan talked less too, often coming home late, citing work. I wasn't sure if it was true, but I no longer had the strength to press him. One evening, while I was washing dishes, my father-in-law came home. He looked weary, carrying a paper bag in his hand. Seeing me, he gave a small nod and asked, "Where's your mother?" "She's been in her room since the afternoon. The door's closed." He said nothing more, just quietly went upstairs. Not long after, raised voices echoed down. My father-in-law's voice was heavy, each word sharp with anger. "How many times have I tolerated you? You let our daughter-in-law shoulder your gambling debts, and you still plan to hide it? Until when?" My mother-in-law's voice broke in sobs. "I know I was wrong, it was a mistake. Please don't shout, if the neighbors hear, it'll be shameful." My father-in-law nearly roared. "Let them hear. Let them know how rotten this family has become. Do you realize how humiliated I am?" I stood frozen in the kitchen, my hands trembling as I gripped the countertop. In that moment, I realized the family I had once admired was nothing more than a glittering facade, hiding decay within. The next morning, as I was getting ready for work, my father-in-law called out, "Non, come here. I need to talk to you." I followed him into the living room. He poured a glass of water, sighed, then spoke in a low voice, "I'm sorry. I should have told you earlier. But I was afraid you'd leave Tuan, afraid this family would fall apart. The truth is, your mother-in-law didn't just start gambling recently. She's been at it since the days she sold cosmetics. She lost all her capital and had to quit. I tried to get her to stop, even considered divorce once. But Tuan begged me to forgive her. I thought she had quit, but she relapsed. I was stunned, almost unable to believe my ears. Then, why didn't anyone tell me? I'm part of this family too. Don't I have the right to know the truth? He looked at me, his eyes weary and full of guilt. Because your mother-in-law is very good at hiding things. In front of you, she always acted gentle and caring. Tuan trusted her blindly. And if I had spoken up, no one would have believed me. Besides, think about it, on your first days as a bride, if you had known everything, would you still have chosen to stay with Tuan? I was silent, unable to answer. Deep down, I knew, if I had known earlier, perhaps I would have walked away. My father-in-law looked at me bitterly. "I can't keep going like this anymore. If she relapses again, I will really file for divorce. And when I say it, I mean it. As for you, don't shoulder everything yourself. You're still young. To suffer like this so early in your marriage, it's such a pity." My nose burned with tears. I stood up, bowed slightly, and whispered, "Yes. Thank you, Dad, for telling me the truth. I never wished for the family to fall apart, but I also couldn't keep turning a blind eye time after time." Hearing me say that, my father-in-law only nodded quietly, as if a part of his burden had been lifted. That night, I sat on the balcony, looking down at the empty street. Tuan silently brought me a cup of warm water, sat beside me, and whispered, "I know you've endured more than you let on." I didn't answer, just stayed silent. Tuan didn't defend his mother, but neither did he know what to do. After all, she was still his mother. It wasn't easy to raise his voice or oppose her. I sighed. "I understand that about you, but understanding doesn't mean I can accept it. We haven't been married long, our love isn't deep enough to heal wounds like these." He held my hand tightly, his fingers trembling. "I'll do whatever it takes so you won't leave me." I turned to look at him and saw in his eyes both sincerity and despair. "I won't leave you. But if this happens again, I won't forgive. A family cannot survive on just one person's efforts. We sat in silence for a long time. The wind carried the scent of milk flowers, but my heart was still heavy. I knew gambling wasn't easy to quit, and my instincts told me this wouldn't be the last time. After that talk, my mother-in-law suddenly changed. She no longer brought up money, woke up early every morning to cook, often wore her gray temple clothes, prayer beads in hand, going in and out of the pagoda. To anyone looking, she seemed like a completely different person, calm, gentle, devout. One day when I came home from work, she handed me a box of mung bean cakes she had made herself, speaking softly. "Try it, dear. I learned the recipe at the temple. Just sweet enough, fragrant and smooth, very good for the stomach." I smiled and thanked her, but inside a sense of unease grew. This change felt like a mist covering a scorched field, not true repentance. Tuan, however, was overjoyed. He said cheerfully, "Don't you see how different Mom is now? She even invited me to go to the temple and wants to sign up for a Buddhist studies class." I only smiled, not wanting to dampen his joy, but inside I stayed wary. From then on, I began watching more closely. Some days she said she was at the pagoda since morning but didn't return until evening, looking exhausted, sometimes even carrying a faint smell of cigarette smoke. I gently asked, "Was there a big ceremony today, Mom? Why were you gone so long?" She forced a smile. "Yes, lots of people. The chanting went on for hours, then I had a vegetarian meal with the nuns." I didn't press further, but my suspicions grew stronger. One weekend, while Tuan was working overtime, I pretended I was visiting a friend. Instead, I sat at a cafe near home, keeping watch. Around 10 o'clock, I saw her in her gray temple clothes, carrying a cloth bag, heading out. I quietly called a cab to follow her. But instead of turning toward the pagoda, she slipped into a narrow alley and entered a small house with a sign reading, "Coffee, Entertainment." My whole body went cold. Over 3 hours later, she finally emerged, her face pale, her steps unsteady. I hid so she wouldn't see me, my heart burning. The fragile trust I had clung to collapsed once more. I went home first and sat in the living room. When she came in, she froze for a moment, then forced a smile. "Oh, you're not out with your friends yet?" I looked straight at her, my voice calm. "Was the pagoda very crowded today, Mom?" She blinked and quickly replied, Yes, very crowded." "I'm exhausted." I stood up, facing her. "I followed you the whole morning, Mom. Is there anything else you'd like to say?"